Hey guys, so since that bunny published his short film, Debí tirar más fotos, as a Puerto Rican high school Spanish teacher in Texas, I've gotten so many phone calls, texts, messages, and questions from kids and other teachers and friends about the video. What did I think? Can I teach it in my class? How do I teach this in my class? What is the background information that I should know to teach it? So here it goes. I'm going to try my best to give you some background so that as a teacher, you can teach this in class, or if you're just curious, you can understand what the big fuzz is about. I feel that at this point, Puerto Ricans are feeling very nostalgic with this video, and I'm going to tell you why. So let's start with the beginning of the video. Let's start at the beginning. We start the video on a plantain field. Plantains are the staple of Puerto Rico. So it is like the Irish potato. This is plantain. So we have a lot of dishes with plantain. We love our plantains. So it's that. So it doesn't get more Puerto Rican than that. Then we have Jacobo Morales. Jacobo Morales is a director, is an actor, is a playwright, is a poet. I've known him my entire life from the TV, not in person. I've never met him. But he is a very, very beloved personality in Puerto Rico. He is 90 years old, so I feel like everybody who's alive in Puerto Rico has to have a chance to see him in something and loves him. It's just a very, very beloved personality. So great pick, Bat Bunny. We see him, and then we see somebody else with him, and we see El Sapo Concho. Concho. At first, when I saw it, I didn't have my. I was like, "That's a really weird cookie." So if you know Puerto Rico and you have a little bit of info, you've been there, you probably thought it was a cookie. It is not a cookie. It is El Sapo Concho, a crested toad. And the importance of that character is that the Sapo Concho was thought to be extinct, and it is endemic to Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. And that's the topic of the video. The video, it's a little the reason we're so sad is because it is kind of like a sad video for us because it's comparing us to an currently endangered species. Jacobo walks to town. He's going to La Panaderia and he's walking. Very typical of older men in Puerto Rico, especially in the countryside, to walk. They're wearing their long sleeve shirts. And you would think, oh my God, it's so hot in Puerto Rico. Why is he wearing a long sleeve and long pants? That's just what our older generations done. It's what my grandfather did, what my husband's grandfather did. And that's the way. So he has his hat, he has his cane, looking all elegant, but that's just normal attire for him. And he's going into town walking. Then when he's walking in his old neighborhood, presumably he's lived there his whole life, he listens and he hears hard rock. Not typical for Puerto Rico at all. When I grew up in the city, so I did grow up listening to English music, but not in the countryside. It's not typical, right? The only thing that you hear in the countryside is hard rock. That's not normal. That's not normal. It's not that people don't hear it ever. It's not normal for it to be the only thing you hear. And then when we see people outside, they're listening to country music and they are making steaks and corn with their salt and pepper, and they're playing football. This is not a typical Puerto Rican scene at all. We would be using more than salt and pepper. We would be using adobo. We would be seasoning with other things. We would not Actually, we wouldn't even be making a steak. We would be making pinchos or maybe even burgers, but not necessarily a steak in front of our houses with our kids playing football. Usually, our the national sport is baseball. So now there's a little bit more people playing soccer, but soccer is not hasn't been traditionally big in Puerto Rico either. Just to get that out there because I know a lot of Latin people play soccer. In Puerto Rico, it's a newer sport in terms of the masses. All right. Then, when you walk down in Puerto Rico in the countryside, when I was growing up, we always say hi to our neighbors. Like, we would just like honk our horn if we're driving because I would not walk down that street in Puerto Rico in the countryside. But we would honk our horn and say hi, and people would just be very friendly. As you see, Jacobo is smiling when he's walking, and he looks at the neighbor, but the neighbor doesn't smile. He doesn't. So very interesting in this video when we see people that when we see people, there's nobody in the video is physically obviously not Puerto Rican because of their race or their traits, their physical traits, yet because of the way they act um, and their mannerisms and what they do and don't do, we know obviously that they're not Puerto Rican. Because normally, if you're walking down the street, you would say hi to your neighbor. That's a normal thing to do. And they didn't. Actually has like a little bit of a threatening face at some point, and he yells at the dog. Another important thing with this scenario is that usually Puerto Ricans have this um, belief in general, and again, this is a very short film, so it's not going to represent everything and everybody, and nothing represents everything and everybody. But there's this a belief that the people from the mainland, the 48 contiguous states that are moving, are people who are rich, people who are highly educated, who are bringing something that maybe we don't have. Oh, that's what I'm going to say, right? These people are not that. These people are just normal middle class people living in a middle class house, and they're living their lives just as if they were wherever they are from. So there's that's an important piece. It's like it's not like they are anything different. They're the equivalent of us, but from somewhere else. So that's going to be an important point. Then when we see the couple walking, that he gets closer to La Panaderia, and we see a couple of tourists that are walking. So it's obviously a tourist. And we also know it's a tourist because, again, if you were in a small town and you're walking down those very narrow sidewalks, you would look up and say hi to the person that you're meeting on the sidewalk, and you would definitely move out of the way and you will leave some space for the other person to move. You wouldn't just absentmindedly walk and just, like the other person does not exist. And that scene is like Jacobo does not exist, especially because he's an older man. Definitely somebody with that same demographic, if they were Puerto Rican, they would have said hi and they would have moved out of the way and let him go first. Okay. When we see the panaderia outside, it looks like a normal Puerto Rican building in a small town. Yet when you go inside, it looks like a coffee shop. Panaderias. Whenever we go there, whenever we visit, we definitely stop in a one, two, or three. They're all over the island, panaderias. Walking distance from my house, I have two different ones. One of them, Moncho Pan. It's one of the most popular breads, sobao breads in the island. If you say Moncho Pan to anyone in San Juan, usually they know what it is, and you start salivating because that bread is delicious. So panaderias are very typical. It's a pastry shop. They have pastries, fresh pastries. They have breads, typical breads. And they also have lunches and sandwiches. So when he asked for bread, and he said, "Would you like criollo?" First of all, it's not criollo. My students, they know it's criollo bread. It has a double L. So criollo, it's also called pan de agua. So the main two options that you get at a panaderia are pan criollo or pan de agua, which is the same thing, or pan sobao. It's lard bread, but it's super delicious. I know it doesn't sound great, but it is delicious. Um, uh, he asked for criollo bread. The importance of that is that criollo also means a Spaniard that was born in outside of Spain, in the New World. So that was interesting that that was his pick. So he selected criollo bread. The other two breads are medianoche bread, which is also like a sweet, yellowish bread, which is super delicious, and Majorca bread, which is also sweet. That one is a little lighter, not as yellow, but that's very typical of Puerto Rico. And he picks the criollo bread. Then he's asking for papa cheese. And we see that has no connection to the culture, right? She has no idea. She's just taking orders there and memorize the menu. I know, but she has no connection. We also see that the men in the back are Puerto Rican, and he's very protective at that point. He's like, "Oh no, he's fine. I'll take care of him." Okay. He makes a face. He gives a wink. He's taking care of his people. He knows what he means, but he's in the back. He's not the one. He's not the one in the front. So that was a little difficult to watch. Um, then he wants a quesito. A quesito is, if you go to any panaderia, you will find quesitos. It's a sweet, flaky pastry filled with cream cheese, sweet cream cheese, right? So it's super delicious. It's served warm. They don't heat it up for you. They just keep it warm in there because they have light bulbs, and they have a special place where they keep them, and the bread as well, so that everything's hot and warm, or warm when you get it. So the quesito is filled with cream cheese. And then she's like, "Oh, let me see," because apparently their bestseller is cheeseless cheese pastry. So he's like, "What is this?" And oh, if I heard correctly, now they have a bacon quesito. Okay, no, that's a big no. You cannot make a bacon the quesito. The quesitos, the furthest, like, after, like, what people have done in the last couple of decades is a guava. So the guava has been a staple. We love guava in Puerto Rico, guava paste. So there's quesito with guava, quesito with bacon. It's not a thing. A quesito with literally is little cheese. Without cheese, it's not a thing either. As the character said, if you're going to make a cheeseless quesito, then call it something else. That doesn't make sense. And then he goes to pay $30. Things are expensive in Puerto Rico, so far. So when I was little, maybe a sandwich like that would be like $3.50 or $4, and a quesito would be $1.75. So let's say it would be $6 for everything. Right now, I was just at a panaderia. The quesitos were like $2 or $3, and the sandwich was like $9. So not $30. But it does give the vibe. If you look at who's sitting there and everything, this is a cafe. Um, Again, panaderias are very male places. So this just looks like a regular coffee shop. It does not look like a panaderia. And obviously at $30, there's no way. But he had money. I mean, it's not like he doesn't have money. But when he goes to pay, that's when he for sure knows that this is no longer his place. So you see his face change, and for the first time in this moment, you see this man that just his heart fell. It's like he's like, "I can't even pay." They tell him that it's a cashless environment, like it's a big favor they're doing for people. He's like, what favor? I have cash. I want to pay. Then he wants to get a fiao, which is he wants to, if he knew the owner, I mean, and presumably he's lived there a long life. So if he knew the owner would be like, yeah, you're good for it. Just pay me tomorrow. And so, they would jot it down somewhere, or if he knew him well, if he would just be good for it. But that was not a possibility anymore. So this man has been removed from his panaderia. They don't have his tripleta. They don't know what papa cheese is, queso de papa is. They have cheeseless quesitos. Nobody looks like him. His friends are not there. So this is no longer his place. It's been displaced. And again, everybody that we see in there, the reason that they're not Puerto Ricans just because of the way they're acting. Even when he says, I'm gonna order this quesito for my friend. He's looking for conversation. One of the cool things when I go back home is that I know I'm gonna have to wait because they're gonna have a conversation with the person before me, and they're gonna have a conversation with me, right? And if I bring it up, it's not like everybody's always talking. It's just that if you say something like, "Oh, it's for my friend," I was like, they would have a little conversation about that, not, or maybe a long one. Who knows? Maybe they'll ask about your friend if they know them, or if they know somebody who knows them, or whatever. It's just about connections, and she calls him a Mister. There's no connection between them, and he was just there last week, and it was a totally different experience for him, right? So that part was very hurtful. Then when he goes back to the house, he talks to Concho, and again, like everywhere, I've traveled a little bit, and whenever you travel, you like see people and whatever. Generations are always, they have the little thing against each other. So I would say, so when he hears the car go by and it's like playing loud music, usually I would say some people be like, oh, those people are so loud. But in this case, especially after that experience, he misses that. He's like, you know what? People usually they used to pass by with their loud music, and it would be reggaeton, or it would be salsa, or be something Caribbean, right? And when he heard, obviously, Bad Bunny's producing this. So but I bet even if he wasn't producing it, Bad Bunny's really popular, so it's a fair thing to have played. So then he misses it, right? And then when we see him in his Jeep, we're like, okay, this was him too. He was a kid at some point. Like we were all kids at some point. We were all teenagers at some point, and it just looks like a lot of fun. So that's why it got to our hearts, because it's like seeing this person who we've loved, we've seen grown and go into a space. We imagine our own fathers or grandfathers walking into their space, and I can't imagine my dad having to order in English his coffee in the morning, and then having to have a discussion, having to explain what kind of cheese he wants or what is it, or um, oh, one more thing for teachers. So when he pulls out the money, he has American dollars because of Puerto Rico's relationship with the US. We do have the currency that we use is the dollar. Interestingly enough, the young man calls it pesos. Son 30 pesos. Son 30 pesos. So we call them pesos. There's a word in Spanish, dólares. But usually, colloquially, we call it pesos, but it's a dollar. It's worth the same thing. And then we see that that young man is in the middle of it, because the young man, for him, one, he was ready to pay, right? He's fine. He knows how to pay with his phone. Um, and two, it's like it's $30, right? What and he's not over it. But the man, the young man is like, it's just 30 pesos. Like we're, you're fine. And thank you for being here. Right. And then that very important line, I can't believe I would stop the video without saying that. When he said, Estamos aquí. We are still here. You and I, and the guy in the back who knows what Papa Cheese is. We are still here, and we're here. We're gonna, like, we know each other, we help each other. um, Yet it was, I think for us it was a kind of dystopia that, maybe some dystopians, the dystopian novels that I've seen are like really horrendous. This was horrendous enough for us, seeing that world in which we don't belong, um, built on what we built, but not, because they didn't build different houses, they didn't build a different panaderia, they didn't, it's the same, it looks the same from the outside, but inside there are things that are going on, that don't include us. Um, so that's what's got into our hearts, and that's why this was such a jewel, because it did hit home. I hope this is super helpful, um, that you got to understand it better, that way you can even understand his songs better for this album. Very grateful, that he published an album that I can finally play for my students in class, because of the words, and my students have always wanted me to play him in class. I just can't. And they say, Mrs. Well, we don't understand those words. I'm like, yeah, but I would, and I'm not listening to that while, I'm here with you in class. Yet, this album is super beautiful, and most of the songs I can play in class, and I've been playing them. So I hope this helps, and, que tengan buen día. Adiós.